Well, at the end of part 1, I got what I consider the worst episode of the entire series out of the way. So here's hoping these episodes will improve somewhat now that I don't have to worry about that one anymore. So starting off this video, we have... oh yeah, this is promising. Yours, Mine, and Mine. This is another episode that was on my top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes video, and when I talked about it, I basically called it the episode that shows Patrick at his absolute worst. Honestly, looking back on it, I don't think it deserves that distinction, and I also don't think it belongs in the top 3 or even top 5 worst episodes for that matter. Hell, I don't even think it's fair to call it the worst Patrick episode. I mean, even though Pet Sitter Pat tries to fix Patrick's horrible actions by making them seem more ignorant, it's honestly in a way that's a much bigger slap in the face to this show's audience than Yours, Mine, and Mine ever could be. But that's most of the positives I can say about it. To me, it's still a top 10 worst episode, and it's still one of the worst Patrick episodes ever made, as well as arguably one of the most obnoxious. It's just an entire episode of Patrick being an annoying and conniving piece of shit to SpongeBob, and it's basically watching a spoiled brat be a spoiled brat for 11 minutes. It's not entertaining, it's not enjoyable, and it leaves me feeling like I should have gotten some babysitting money for lasting through it. Also, the excuse of Patrick's an idiot, so of course he wouldn't understand sharing, doesn't work in the slightest here. This guy is still smart enough to use underhanded tactics to keep SpongeBob from playing with this toy that SpongeBob bought. I mean, if he's smart enough to do that, he's smart enough to understand what he's doing is wrong. He's clearly written in a way where he just doesn't care. I guess I could see this being a guilty pleasure for some people, because maybe it could be an episode where Patrick is just so obnoxious that he somehow becomes entertaining, but I honestly have nothing to add that I didn't say in this video. And thank God I can move on from it without any further damage.
If I could help it, no one can.
The next episode, however, is Cracked Crabs, which is about Mr. Krabs being nominated for the Cheapest Crab Award by his fellow cheapskate crabs, and he brings SpongeBob along with him to their convention, showing the audience what happens when a group of Mr. Krabs clones get together. This is another episode that falls into the basic plot category, but it does get a nice amount of material out of the basic plot. From Mr. Krabs trying to teach SpongeBob how to be cheap, to showing off all the creatively stingy ways these other crabs use to try and save as much money as possible. And you know what? Props to them for actually having fun with Krabs' cheapness in a way that's actually somewhat inventive.
I, Eugene Krabs, have only spent on me travel the price of a 1-cent stamp. Chintzy McGee!
Thanks for letting me hitch a ride, Krabs. I didn't have to spend a penny on travel.
That being said, there's still nothing really special about this episode either. It's really just your typical SpongeBob episode, with a few decent jokes and some jokes that are just, well, too predictable, like SpongeBob's misunderstanding of what exaggeration is. I mean, not only is it the exact same joke they make in the season 4 episode Shell of a Man, but the majority of the second half is centered only on this misunderstanding, so you better have found it funny the first time around, or else you're just gonna be bored with the rest of the episode. But honestly, I'm not too mad about this episode being like that, since it would have been really easy to get carried away with Krabs' cheapness, like they've done in way too many episodes already, so it's nice to see they had a decent idea and didn't try to get too fancy with it. And after suffering through 3 terrible episodes in a row, this was honestly a breath of fresh air, and it's more evidence that sometimes it's best to let a simple plot stay simple, instead of oversaturating it with jokes that make the whole episode worse.
But whatever you do, don't lend anyone money.
25, 26...
And we follow that up with Curse of Bikini Bottom, which is about SpongeBob and Patrick ruining the Flying Dutchman's beard before his big date. So as punishment, he sentences them to be ghosts like him until his beard grows back. And SpongeBob and Patrick find out being ghosts is actually a much bigger pain in the ass than you would think. First off, props to this episode for mixing it up with the ghost storyline, because they find many out-of-the-box ways to get their ghost-related humor in, and I really appreciate that. Also, episodes with the Flying Dutchman are almost always enjoyable, and you can tell the writers have fun creating things that his powers can do, while still managing to keep him a pretty entertaining straight man to SpongeBob and Patrick's nonsense.
Okay, you're having too much fun.
They get some decent comedy out of Squidward as well, and that's because they let the jokes work themselves in instead of forcing them in.
Invisible to the world.
Living without his soul!
It's miserable.
How could anyone live like this?
And honestly, this is the type of creative stuff I expect from this show. Exploring other options and actually analyzing the humor that all audiences will enjoy, instead of humor that they assume the audience will be too stupid to notice. And this episode is easily one of the most creative and clever from this complete ghost of a season.
I didn't sleep so good last night.
I didn't sleep at all. I could see through my eyelids. My eyelids!
And now we move on to Squidward and Clarinet Land. Now, this is another episode I put in my top 10 best SpongeBob episodes from season 6 through 8 list. But it's also one that people are very mixed on. It's about Squidward having a big clarinet recital after work, and getting a locker from Mr. Krabs to keep his clarinet in. And SpongeBob ends up turning the locker into a completely different universe, making Squidward have to go through this crazy universe in order to find his clarinets. Now I know why a lot of people hate this episode. They feel it gives off too much of a Squidward torture porn vibe. But I honestly have a soft spot for SpongeBob episodes that are parodies of classic stories, like Squeaky Boots, which is a parody of Telltale Heart, for example. And Squidward in Clarinet Land is a parody of Alice in Wonderland, and honestly I think it captures the feel of Alice in Wonderland very well. I know one of the biggest issues people have with it is the way this world treats Squidward, and SpongeBob constantly running off with Squidward's clarinets. But I think these work because they're based off of major elements of both the movie and book, with SpongeBob representing the White Rabbit, and the universe running off absolutely no logic like Wonderland does. I guess I can see how it's easy for these not to connect with a lot of people, since they're clearly trying to make it their own style, as opposed to a direct recreation of Alice in Wonderland. But for me, it still managed to connect, and it still managed to impress me how they portrayed all of this. I said enough about this episode in this video, so I'll just end it here by calling this episode a personal, wonderful experience.
And how did you get so big?
Must be all the pressure.
What are you talking about?
It must be the pressure.
And next up is SpongeBob's Last Stand, the first special to ever be talked about on a seasonal review. And because specials are supposed to stand out more compared to regular episodes, I decided to double the points they can earn. Now this special is about Plankton making a superhighway in order to shut down the Krusty Krab, and building it in Jellyfish Fields. So SpongeBob and Patrick protest the highway in an attempt to save these things from being destroyed. I'll be honest, before doing this seasonal review, I completely forgot about this special, and after rewatching it, I'm not surprised in the slightest that I forgot about it, because there's next to nothing special about this special. I mean, I get it's trying to do an environmental message and all, but it feels like an episode that's doing the message because it has to. Like someone from Nick just came in one day and said, "This show needs an environmental special, make one now." Because everything in it is just the most generic environmental stuff you see in almost any environmental form of media. The environment getting destroyed for a highway. The guy behind it being a cold, heartless bastard with no good in him. The people who stand for it regretting it once they see the effect it has. Everyone coming together to right their wrong. It's as generic as can be, and honestly, it didn't even need to be a special. This idea could have easily been 11 minutes, because most of it is just padding instead of actually exploring why people don't always care about the environment, and why they actually should. I mean, aside from Mr. Krabs, absolutely no one gives a reason to support this highway other than the plot demands it. And even Mr. Krabs' reasoning is only used as a joke. Also, the humor? Good lord, the humor here is dry and stretched to the point where it's obvious it's only used to fill the remaining time. It's honestly kind of embarrassing how obviously lazy it is.
Would you care to say a few words
Hi,
about...
Mom. Hi, Dad. Hey, Dr. Sleen. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Sally. Hey, Francis. Hey, Mabel. Hey, Julie. Hey, Abigail.
Also, as is custom with any SpongeBob special, there's also a few songs in this. The Jellyfishing song, a reprise of the Jellyfishing song, and Give Jellyfish Fields a Chance. And all of them are as forgettable and lazily written as possible. The Jellyfishing song is mostly just this.
Jelly, lolly, lolly, jelly, jelly, lolly, lolly, jelly, it's a jellyfishing song. Jelly, lolly, lolly, jelly, jelly, lolly, lolly, jelly, everyone sing along.
Though I admit it is kinda cute when the jellyfish provide the background music. And Give Jellyfish Fields a Chance is nothing but them rhyming random ass words together.
Ketchup, bubble, net and guggle, tool blue, rotten tooth, freeway plan, toast and jam, mermaid man, garbage can.
I get that some songs need to be comedic and all, but this is just too lazy and really reinforces my beliefs that the staff was forced to make this episode, because there doesn't seem to be any drive in this. That is, until the end. While the end still has its generic moments, it does still feel somewhat satisfying. It's also satisfying to watch the jellyfish rebel against the Bikini Bottomites, but that's more because they're written as so black and white that you know you're supposed to want to see them regret their decisions in such a tremendous way. But overall, this is just one of the season's more forgettable episodes, and for a special, that's not what you want. And it's funny to me that this episode actually got some controversy for being an environmental one, because this episode has such little push to it that I'd be very surprised if it inspired a bunch of people to start caring about the environment, because there's nothing to remember. That's this episode in a nutshell, an episode people won't even remember seeing on their drive through this season.
So what do you say, everybody? Will you help me?
No!
You're kidding, right?
Yes!
And now we move on to Back to the Past. Someday. Anyway, this episode is about SpongeBob, Patrick, Mermaid Man, and Barnacle Boy all going to the past and ruining the time they stopped Man Ray. And as a result, Bikini Bottom becomes enslaved by Man Ray, and they all have to go back to the past once again to try and stop him. Yeah, honestly, this episode is filled with stuff I shouldn't like. Patrick's got his asshole moments, the characters at times feel a bit flanderized, and the writing is all over the place. And by some unbelievable miracle, this episode still manages to be easy to follow, enjoyable, and actually well written and paced. I should say first off, it is one of the longer episodes, as it hits a roughly 15-minute runtime, but it actually takes full advantage of it. There's very few moments that feel like filler, and yeah, while Patrick has his asshole moments, they're actually used in efficient ways to set the plot up. I think this is what Yours, Mine, and Mine tried to do with Patrick, but it failed by making Patrick's dickish behavior the complete center of the plot instead of only a small portion to set up or move along the plot. The overtaken town is pretty awesome too. I'm pretty sure the idea was ripped from the first movie, but at least they changed it up enough to where it actually feels different. Also, I give them points for sticking to the continuity from Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 3.
Jumpin' jellyfish, Mermaid Man. What happened to the tartar sauce?
It appears to be some sort of prison chamber made out of frozen tartar sauce.
Considering how much liberties the writers have been taking with this season, this was certainly a pleasant surprise, and the ending, good God, is it written in such a crazy yet humorous way. In fact, it's in a way where it seems like they know how ridiculous the concept of time travel is, and they're just embracing it, which is great because that really lets your humorous juices flow. In fact, the more I watch this, the more sure I am that Back to the Pilot from Family Guy got some inspiration from this. Hell, their setups and endings are borderline identical, so that's gotta say something. Honestly, it's always nice to come across an episode that can make pet peeves you have work out very well. And I guess by that logic, this is one of the best episodes of the entire season. And it's one I'll always be happy to go back to.
Now, Patrick!
I can't get my head around this.
Next is the Bad Guy Club for Villains, which is another episode I talked about on my top 10 best episodes from season 6 through 8 video. Well, this episode is just a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode, and it's a parody of the 1960s Batman series starring Adam West and Burt Ward, who surprisingly voiced the younger versions of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy in Back to the Past, yet they didn't voice the younger versions here. And not to mention, this is the sister episode of Back to the Past. I guess the crew only had a coupon to use West and Ward's voices for one episode. But honestly, this is a fun episode that really captures the cartoony feel of the 1960s comedy series. And you would think it being a cartoon itself would probably water down that feel a bit, but actually it kind of uses it to its full potential, which I find incredibly impressive. Like Road Spout, I went over this enough in this video, and I don't have that much to add here, but it is one of my favorite Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episodes from this series. A super helping hand to a season in deep trouble.
That's right. Remember, kids, no one can imprison you for reading.
Next up is A Day Without Tears. Now, when people say that SpongeBob is a kid show and I shouldn't be too hard on it, or shouldn't watch it because I'm too old for it, I think these are the episodes they think SpongeBob makes, because this is one of the most kid show-esque episodes in the entire series. It's about Squidward getting fed up with SpongeBob's constant crying, and betting him he couldn't go an entire day without crying. And that's the whole episode. All these cliche things that bring tears to your eyes being used by Squidward to try and make SpongeBob cry. I mean, let's be honest, this episode is nothing but a filler episode. There's nothing worth remembering, there's nothing that really stands out, the plot is almost identical to Funny Pants, and it feels like it's really just something for a kid to watch to keep them occupied for a bit. I mean, I'm not against those episodes, but I think a lot of people really underestimate how much thought and effort went into a lot of SpongeBob episodes before these seasons. I mean, episodes like this do the show absolutely no justice. While this isn't by any stretch one of the worst episodes, I mean, I don't think it's infuriating or anything, and I give it credit for being one of the few episodes that has Squidward bringing his quote-unquote torment onto himself, or at least in a non-malicious way. But apparently there's a lot of people who completely hate this episode, and I don't even think it's worth hating. It's too bland and too uninteresting to even deserve hate in my opinion. Overall, it's an episode that will definitely bore any older watcher of this show to tears.
And he kept crying and crying and crying and crying and that's right, you can do it.
I'm wondering if it might not be so healthy to hold in all my tears, Squidward.
And now we move on to Summer Job. Now, I won't lie, I do find this episode interesting. It's about Mrs. Puff crashing into the Krusty Krab while trying to avoid SpongeBob, and being forced to work there until she can pay off the damages. Meaning, she's forced to deal with SpongeBob at his place of work, instead of the other way around for a change. On paper, that sounds like a promising idea. No, really, a role reversal episode like this has a lot of comedic potential. But unfortunately, I don't think a whole lot of that potential gets realized. First off, credit to them for making Mrs. Puff bring her torment onto herself, because she does overreact to SpongeBob simply trying to give her a note, and I think this kind of plays into what I said about how making the grade from the Loud House should have been executed, with Mrs. Puff causing her misery by her own assumptions. But when she starts working at the Krusty Krab, all the comedic potential just gets wasted and turned into the same joke over and over again. Now that can work too. It did in Doing Time, where the majority of the episode is just SpongeBob and Patrick trying to break Mrs. Puff out of prison. But that worked because the situations were a lot more creative and got a lot more material out of the stereotypes of being in jail. But here, they're just SpongeBob being annoying and Mrs. Puff being angry, with little to no differences between the jokes.
It must have slipped your mind that you also need to submit the order in writing as well. It's the only way to ensure maximum clarity.
Fine, here's your written form.
Well, I wouldn't go that way if I were you. It's faster if you go this way, Mrs. P.
And the sad thing is, there is actually some effort put into this. For example, the entire scene in the Krusty Krab is SpongeBob regurgitating the teaching techniques that Mrs. Puff uses. But there ends up actually being a reason for them, because it turns out the note SpongeBob wanted to give to Mrs. Puff is to inform her that he's going to be taking up a driver's ed job. I mean, the idea of SpongeBob being a boating instructor sounds like it should be its own episode, but I do appreciate them for actually knowing how to work up to that payoff. But everything in between is just so poorly put together and lazily written to me. While I personally feel this episode is a bit overhated, I still wouldn't call it anything special, and I would say it is a waste of a good idea. Something I would still recommend you drive right by.
And the patty is unscathed! Way to go, Mrs. Puff! Your first satisfied customer. I will have to deduct points for that landing, though.
Well, once again, there's only one episode left, but there's no way this episode can be as bad as the episode I ended my last video with. Oh, come on! Oh, God! Okay, now, believe it or not, I do have something I can add to this, and don't worry, it's not going to be as lengthy as A Pal for Gary was. I actually have something to add about the infamous trying to get run over joke. I will say when I discussed this episode in my top 10 worst SpongeBob episodes video, I did get too sucked into this joke being too dark for a kid's show. Honestly, looking at this joke, I actually think it could have worked if it was in a different context. For example, let's say you put this joke in, I don't know, Single Cell Anniversary, and let's say you use it in that scene where SpongeBob hears Plankton's cries of despair. Let's say instead, those cries of despair lead SpongeBob to Plankton lying in the road, and when SpongeBob asks him what he's doing, he says,
Go away, cheesehead. Can't you see I'm trying to get run over?
But let's say SpongeBob asks him why he's so down, like he does in Single Cell Anniversary, and Plankton tells him he can't think of what to get Karen for their anniversary. So he might as well get himself run over, because she'll just run over him when he comes home with nothing anyway. And then SpongeBob saying,
Got a love emergency!
that would have been a much better use of this joke. Even though it's still very adult, in that context, it would actually feel like just another adult joke. Kind of like the don't drop them prison rape joke in Gary Takes a Bath. Instead of a character who was being mentally fucked with the whole time, being driven to suicide, again using the very poor excuse of dark humor. So, that's all I have to add. This joke is not DOA, it actually can work in this show, just like the jokes in Nasty Patty worked. But honestly, anything I have to say about this episode and why it fails, I already said when discussing A Pal for Gary. It's lazy, it has no idea how dark humor works, and it completely insults the intelligence of its audience. It clearly thinks most kids are too stupid to see if a character is being treated poorly, and thinks most kids would actually find poorly written substance like this funny. While I personally consider A Pal for Gary to be the worst episode of the whole series, I will never argue with anyone who considers this the worst, and I'm not surprised in the slightest that more people consider this worse than A Pal for Gary. And don't be fooled by me appearing less angry about this either. I used all my anger on A Pal for Gary in the last video, but Trust me, this episode is yet another episode worthy of a 0 out of 10.
Just thought it would be pertinent for you to know that Plankton's laying in the street. Forlorn.
Really? He's a mess.
Damn, both videos ended with 0 out of 10 episodes. I guess this season had a 10 episode curse or something. Who am I kidding? This whole season is cursed. But anyway, it's time once again to end this video and let my poor psyche cool down before I have to tackle the rest of the episodes. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.